Winter arrived early in the town of Belmont, its cold grasp sending a chill through the streets. Eleanor Morgan sat by the window of a small cafe on Oak Avenue, staring outside at the swirling snowflakes. Stay tuned till the end for an incredible revelation that nobody saw coming. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories. Her thin coat provided little protection against the early November cold, and she huddled closer to the warmth of the steamy espresso machine. Eleanor had been working as a barista at the cafe for almost a year now, a modest existence since her world had been turned upside down. She had just wiped the condensation from the window, her mind distant and filled with worries. Today was supposed to be a quiet day, but a thought had lingered in the back of her mind. The same thought that had been haunting her for weeks. She needed to leave early today. Her son, Ethan, was soon to return from school. "Hey, Eleanor," Janet, the cafe owner, called from behind the counter with a kind smile. "You've had a long day. Go ahead, I'll take over for the rest of the shift. You need to pick up Ethan, right?" Eleanor smiled faintly, appreciating Janet's understanding. "Thank you, Janet. I really appreciate it," she replied, removing her apron and quickly grabbing her purse. Janet had been a constant support, especially since Eleanor had become a single mother. She always made sure to give her some breathing space when needed. As she stepped outside, the cool wind greeted her, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts drifted to her son, Ethan, and the life she had built with him since her husband, Thomas, had passed away in a car accident shortly after Ethan's birth. It had been nearly 7 years now, and she had done everything on her own. Though their life wasn't easy, it was filled with love, and that's all that mattered. When she reached her small apartment, she checked the mailbox and found an envelope that caught her attention. It was elegant, with gold lettering on the front. She opened it, and her eyes scanned the invitation printed on the fine paper. "You and Ethan Morgan are cordially invited to the wedding of Claire Carter and Matthew Johnson." Eleanor sighed heavily. Claire was her younger sister, always the center of attention in their family, with her beauty and charm. She had recently become engaged to Matthew Johnson, the son of a wealthy businessman, and the thought of the wedding filled Eleanor with a mix of emotions: resentment, bitterness, and uncertainty. She held the invitation in her hands as she walked into her apartment, her heart heavy with conflicting feelings. When she opened the door, Ethan jumped up from the table where he had been doing his homework. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he ran over to greet her. His smile immediately melted Eleanor's weariness. "How was school today, sweetie?" she asked as she bent down to hug him. "I got an A+ on my history test," Ethan exclaimed, his face glowing with pride. Eleanor smiled, but the worry lingered in her mind. She thought about the invitation again. Since their father had passed away 3 years ago, Eleanor had been increasingly distanced from her family, especially her mother, Beatrice. Their mother had always doted on Claire, her perfect, social butterfly daughter, while Eleanor often felt like an afterthought. Without her father's support, Eleanor didn't know where she stood within the family anymore. The invitation brought all those feelings back. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Eleanor sat on the couch, flipping through an old photo album. Her father's image smiled back at her, and she could feel the tears welling up. She had been so close to him, and now, without him, it felt like her place in the family had vanished. The next morning, Eleanor decided to call Claire. Her sister answered with a surprised tone. "You're coming?" Claire asked. "How nice. Mom will be so happy." Eleanor, sensing the sarcasm in her sister's voice, pressed on. "Yes, we're coming. Ethan is really excited. It's his aunt's wedding, after all." Claire's response was curt. "Make sure you and Ethan are dressed appropriately. Matthew's family is from high society, and we need to make a good impression." The words stung, but Eleanor responded with controlled calmness. "Don't worry, we won't embarrass you." As she hung up the phone, Eleanor gazed out the window at the falling snow. She made up her mind to attend, for Ethan's sake, and for the memory of her father. On the wedding day, the grand reception hall at the Oakwood Mansion was a picture of luxury. White lilies and gold ribbons decorated the space, with an enormous chandelier casting a warm glow over the crowd. The guests were all dressed in the finest of attire, and Eleanor felt out of place in her modest navy dress. Ethan, too, wore a simple suit that looked dull compared to the designer clothing worn by the other children. As they entered the ballroom, they were directed to a small table at the back, where a simple card read Morgan Family. Eleanor's heart sank as she looked around at the extravagant event, feeling more and more out of place. Ethan's soft voice broke through her thoughts. "Mom, everyone looks so sparkly." Eleanor gently squeezed his shoulder. "They do, but it's okay. We're here because we were invited, and that's enough." The ceremony was breathtaking. Claire walked down the aisle in her perfect white gown, and the atmosphere was nothing short of magical. After the vows were exchanged, the guests moved to the grand ballroom for the reception, where the party began in full swing. Luxurious food was served, and Ethan, who had never tasted such fine cuisine, eagerly tried everything. Despite the tension, Eleanor was relieved to see her son so happy. The reception continued with speeches and dancing, but then something unexpected happened. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight shone down on Eleanor and Ethan's table. Claire, with a microphone in hand, walked toward them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Claire said with a wide smile, "thank you so much for being here today to celebrate with me. But there's one more special treat. Please, let's give a warm welcome to my sister Eleanor and her son Ethan." The spotlight burned down on them, and all eyes turned to Eleanor and Ethan, making them feel like the center of attention in the worst possible way. Claire continued, "As you can see, my sister is a single mother, and her son, well, they live in a different world from us." Laughter echoed around the room, and Eleanor's face froze. She could see the smug look on Claire's face, and she felt the sting of humiliation. But Claire wasn't finished. "So, today, I'd like to offer a special charity auction for my sister and her adorable son. Would anyone like to buy them?" The room erupted in laughter, and Eleanor's heart shattered. Ethan, who had been enjoying the event, now sat frozen in fear, tears welling up in his eyes. He turned to her, his voice shaking. "Mom, what's happening?" Eleanor stood, her body trembling with rage, but before she could act, a voice interrupted. "I'll buy them," came a calm, dignified voice from the back of the room. "I'll pay $1 million for Eleanor and her son." The room fell silent as the man, dressed impeccably in a well-tailored suit, stepped into the spotlight. His blue eyes were filled with calm resolve as he walked toward the stage. "I am Thomas Blackwell, the attorney for the late Richard Morgan," the man said. The mention of her late father's name sent a shockwave through the room. Eleanor's heart raced as she turned to face the man. This was the last person she had expected to see today. The room fell into a heavy silence as Thomas Blackwell, the lawyer, walked toward the stage. His presence was calm, almost regal, as though he belonged there, even though no one recognized him. His eyes briefly met Eleanor's, and he nodded in acknowledgement before continuing. "I am Thomas Blackwell, the attorney of Richard Morgan, Eleanor's late father," he said again, his voice steady and clear, as though he were addressing an important matter at a board meeting rather than a family wedding. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen or heard from any of her father's associates since his death, and now, out of nowhere, this lawyer was making a dramatic entrance at her sister's wedding. The crowd, still uncertain, stared at him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "Eleanor, Ethan, would you please stand and join me?" Thomas asked, his voice gentle yet authoritative. Eleanor hesitated. What was happening? Why was this man, who she had never met before, standing up for her and her son? But something in his demeanor made her feel like she could trust him. She stood slowly, taking Ethan's hand. As she made her way to the center of the room, the crowd began to murmur. Claire's face turned pale, and her smile, which had been plastered on her face just moments before, now faltered. Eleanor could feel her heart beating faster, a sense of dread and curiosity swirling in her chest. Thomas paused and addressed the audience. What is happening here today is not a joke. It's a moment of truth. A sense of anticipation filled the air as he turned to Eleanor. I have here the final will of your father, Richard Morgan, who passed away a year ago. This will is the true and legally binding document that was kept hidden until now. The room was deathly quiet. Martha, who had been seated at the head table, stood up, her face turning crimson. What do you mean, hidden? There is no such will, she hissed, but her voice wavered. Thomas calmly opened an envelope and pulled out a set of papers. He raised them high enough for the projector at the side of the room to display them on the large screen. The words on the screen sent a shockwave through the guests as the will's contents appeared in bold letters. This document declares that 85% of the assets of Morgan Enterprises and all related properties shall be equally divided between my daughter Eleanor Morgan and my grandson Ethan Morgan. Martha's face turned ghostly white as the words echoed in the room. That's impossible, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. My husband never signed anything like this. He couldn't have. He never would have left everything to them. Thomas remained unshaken, his eyes steady as he looked at the audience, then directly at Martha. Martha, I'm afraid your actions over the past years were carefully documented. Your attempts to manipulate the company, hide assets, and exclude Eleanor from her rightful inheritance were all captured. This is the true will, which was executed in secrecy for a reason. As he continued, the crowd's murmurs became louder. Some guests exchanged shocked looks, while others seemed utterly confused by the turn of events. Claire, who had been standing by, her hands tightly clasped, suddenly stepped forward. This can't be right. I had everything handled. My father's business dealings were mine to oversee. She tried to keep her voice steady, but Eleanor could hear the desperation in her tone. Thomas turned his gaze towards Claire with an air of finality. The documents prove otherwise. Your father knew of your actions, Claire. He understood the manipulations that were happening behind his back, and in his last days, made arrangements to ensure that Eleanor and Ethan would not be cut out of their legacy. At this moment, the guests were in a state of disbelief. The tables, once filled with laughter and celebration, had turned cold. It was clear that no one had expected this drama to unfold, and they were left to process the shocking revelations. Eleanor, holding Ethan's hand tightly, stood there in stunned silence. She felt a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, anger, sadness, and even a bit of relief. All the years of feeling pushed aside by her mother and sister, all the doubts about her place in the family, now seemed to be slowly unraveling. Thomas addressed the crowd once more. This is not just about money. This is about what was rightfully Eleanor's all along. And now she will step forward as the rightful heir to Morgan Enterprises. The guests, still reeling from the news, looked on with a mixture of awe and hesitation. Martha, now trembling, sank back into her chair, defeated. She knew she had no more arguments left to make. Claire turned toward the back of the room, her face contorted with emotion, her pride and arrogance crumbling in the face of truth. She, too, knew the game was over. Just as the tension seemed unbearable, a soft voice broke the silence. It was Ethan, his small face looking up at Eleanor with wide, innocent eyes. Mom, does this mean we don't have to go back to that small apartment anymore? Eleanor, her heart heavy with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future, knelt down and hugged him. No, darling, we don't. We're going to be okay. As the room slowly began to clear and the chaos subsided, Thomas approached Eleanor and her son. His face was kind, but there was an underlying authority in his gaze. There is still much to be done. The transition will take time, but I'll be here to help guide you through it. Your father's legacy is in safe hands now. Eleanor nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude toward the man who had unexpectedly shown up and changed her life forever. She had never known that her father had planned so carefully for her future, and yet, it all made sense now. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, paperwork, and adjustments. Eleanor found herself adjusting to her new role as CEO of Morgan Enterprises. At first, she was overwhelmed, but as time passed, she began to find her footing. With Thomas by her side and a strong team of employees backing her, Eleanor was able to steer the company toward a new direction, one that not only respected her father's legacy, but also aligned with her own values. Ethan thrived in his new school, and with the support of his mother, he began to heal from the trauma of the past. Though the memory of the wedding day still haunted Eleanor, she found comfort in the fact that she was no longer a passive spectator in her own life. She was finally in control. Months passed, and Eleanor's leadership in Morgan Enterprises began to shine. Her vision for a more socially responsible company resonated with investors, and her proposal for eco-friendly housing projects for single parents gained significant traction. She also established a foundation in her father's name, dedicated to supporting single mothers like herself, and soon it became a beacon of hope for many. The final twist came when, one evening, as she was reflecting on everything she had achieved, Thomas came to visit her at her office. He had become more than just her legal advisor. He had become a trusted confidant. "Eleanor," he said, sitting across from her with a gentle smile, "you've done more than just manage a company. You've honored your father's legacy and created something meaningful. And I've always believed in you." Eleanor smiled, her eyes filled with quiet satisfaction. "Thank you, Thomas. I never would have believed I could get here on my own. But now, I see that I was never alone." As the seasons changed, so did Eleanor's life. Her relationship with her mother and sister remained distant, but she no longer felt the ache of rejection. The love and support she had received from Thomas, her son, and her father's true legacy had been more than enough. And on a quiet winter's evening, as snow once again fell outside the window of her new office, Eleanor gazed out at the city lights. With Ethan by her side and the weight of her father's trust lifting her spirit, she finally felt at peace. She had found her place, no longer just a woman trying to survive, but a woman who was thriving, in charge of her own destiny. As she looked at Ethan, who was now fast asleep on the couch, she whispered, "We're going to be just fine, my love. Your grandpa would be so proud of us." And with that, the story of Eleanor Morgan's journey to self-discovery, legacy, and empowerment had just begun.